I was raised in a very Orthodox family, very conservative Catholic family. I've never heard an argument between my mother and my father, ever. His position was cut in stone, and her position was very clear. They worked together very harmoniously. We had 7 kids. It's like living in a zoo, practically speaking. But my father ruled the family. Before I met Prabhupada, the seed incident was that my brother died of cancer when he was only 7 years old. And I suffered terribly, 3 operations, brain tumor. So I asked the priest at the coffin, I said, Father, where's God in all this? Why does my brother have to suffer so much? He said, I don't know. I said, it says in the Bible, as you sow, you reap. What has he sown? I was only 10. He said, I have no answer. I said, Father, there must be no God. Everything is just based on chance. Everybody has something. It's a very reasonable answer. So then later on, I got a book on Buddha, and I read that he was explaining that future life is depending on this life. This life depends on the previous life. It was like a thunderbolt on my head, like a thunderbolt. I said, that's it. That's the solution. So I became interested in Indian philosophy. I went to college, studied comparative religion at the University of Bonn, and then I got a book, some other. I read it overnight in a train to Paris. I couldn't stop reading. In the morning, I said, that's it. I'm going to join the Hare Krishna movement. All the answers were there in perfection. I knew quite a bit of it, but in perfection expressed, it was when I read Ishopanishad. That was the thing. That was a turnabout. That actually Prabhupada pulled me in.
I met Srila Prabhupada in the London Bury Place Temple. And we used to have really ecstatic artiks in the evening, the Sundaratik. We'd be out on Oxford Street, up and down for like 6, 7 hours. Well, say 6 hours. And then we'd come back for the artik. And I was getting really very particular about the way I looked this particular evening. My dhoti, to make sure it was all straight, my tilak was good. Then all of a sudden, Dhananjaya comes running up. I was just about to go into the temple room. And he says, Gunarnava, he says, Srila Prabhupada wants to see you. And my heart started pounding. And so I went, and I met Srila Prabhupada. And I paid my obeisances, and he was sitting there. And as I got up, I could see the aura. Srila Prabhupada has this golden hue. And he said, I hear you know about construction work. And I used to be an industrial boiler maker, working on very big power stations. I used to do welding and pipe work and all kinds of stuff like that. And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, to some extent I do know construction work. So he said, I want you to go to India immediately, to Vrindavan, and start. But when I arrived in, I think it was July or August of '72, there was nothing happening whatsoever. We weren't even living on the land. So, things took 1 year. Nothing really happened until just before '73, just a little after '73. And It wasn't until Surabi came, and it wasn't until Guru Kripa and his Namhata party started collecting that things really started to move. And it got to the point where, you know, two engineers behind, Mr. Lahiri, they were both Bengali, Mr. Uja, and we had a Muslim contractor, building contractor, a local man from Vrindavan. And then just fast forwarding, it was getting to the point where it was mentioned, I forget the history of it, but it was Srila Prabhupada wanted the temple built and opened by Janmashtami. And we just couldn't make that deadline. Even though at that time we'd employed over 350 workers working round the clock. The whole construction site was lit up like a, you know, like it was daylight. And then Surabi at the point realized that there was no domes. There was no facility for domes. And these domes had to be built secretly because we didn't really want anyone to know that the domes weren't built. And the design that was already established, not by Surabi and his architect, by a previous architect, there was no real facility, so we had to build foundations. We had to dig. It was all night we were digging in the basement. And then eventually we managed to build these domes. But it wasn't until we hired all these extra workers that we were able to do and meet the deadline in Ram Navami. Prabhupada was very, very upset. And but at least there was no advertisements going out, and we were fortunate in that sense. And Prabhupada, working with Prabhupada in Vrindavan on the construction, Prabhupada has two sides. He has the father-like soft rose personality, and then he has the thunderbolt, very, very heavy. Guru means heavy. It's one of the aspects of Guru. So eventually we got the temple open, and I remember the day after we were on the morning walk, and Prabhupada said, he stopped and he said, if I didn't think that you could handle my intensity, he says, I would never have asked you to come. So very humbly, Prabhupada thanks us for all the work that we had done. And I remember one time when we came out of Prabhupada's house, he had blasted Surabi and myself for something, I can't remember what it was. And we went back to our room, and we kind of made a pact that whatever Prabhupada said to us, it didn't matter how intense it was, we would absorb it like a sponge, because we knew that Prabhupada was under so much pressure on so many different levels. They even wanted to build a fuel station right outside. They wanted to take the first, I think it was 35 meters, retain it, Sarafs. They wanted to do that. And Prabhupada says we just have to build very quickly, and that's what we did.
So when I met Prabhupada in person was in 1972, when he came to Amsterdam. And at that time we didn't have European Union. We had custom control from country to country. So I came the day before, on a flight from Frankfurt, went through customs, immigration. And so I knew when Prabhupada was arriving, the devotees were at the carousels with the luggages, expecting Prabhupada to come down the stairs, and I went alone upstairs. And there he was, in immigration. And I lifted my camera, and I clicked. And he lifted up his hand like this, with a big smile on his face. I have the photo. So it was just between me and Prabhupada. There was nobody left and right or behind. And I fell on the ground and I cried and I laughed and had all kinds of contradictory emotions going through me. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like this. And he walked by and he went downstairs into the VIP room. There was a discussion. People were waiting for him. There was an initiation. There was an initiation, sannyas initiation of one devotee. And there was an installation of the Jagannath deities. And Prabhupada came in, the deities were to be installed, and he sat down, and he looked at the Havan, and said, "Where are the flowers? Where are the flowers?" Srila Prabhupada, "Where are the flowers?" This is Krishna's mouth. "I want the flowers, right now." Prabhupada said, "Prabhupada, the television is here." Prabhupada said, "I don't care for the television, I care that Krishna has no flowers." So somebody Russian about the flowers. A very strong Prabhupada moment, could be very angry for Krishna, you know. And then he installed, and then so many things happened. He went to Fondle Park, with thousands of young kids lying around.
This next story is an incredible story. It was during that austere time in Vrindavan, and there was one resident sannyasi, and he was put in charge of paying checks to workers and also taking in materials that had to be paid for. So he was paying checks to these different contractors that were bringing materials. And all he had to do was that service, nothing else, basically. So he'd sit at a desk and he would chant. But his mouth never moved. You never heard anything coming from his mouth. Only you could see the flick of his bead bag like that. Every time he chanted a bead, it would flick like that. And as Prabhupada was coming next time for the Nectar of Devotion classes, he was getting very excited, and he would say to me, "I can't wait for Prabhupada to come, because he's going to reveal the intimate pastimes of Radharani." Prabhupada's going to reveal these intimate pastimes of Radharani. So when Prabhupada eventually came, and the Nectar of Devotion classes was right outside Rupa Goswami's Samadhi. It was a beautiful setting. When Prabhupada started the classes, from the beginning to when Prabhupada stopped or finished the classes, Prabhupada didn't leave the analytical study of Sankhya philosophy in Bhagavad Gita. You go 2/3 into the first chapter, and then another 3/4 of the second chapter is all about the analytical study of Sankhya philosophy, the material nature, the spiritual nature, and controller of both. So every day, Subal Swami was getting more and more and more frustrated. And you could, the face is the index of the mind, and you could see he was starting to get really flustered. Not hearing, "Prabhupada, where's the Radharani intimate pastime, So he got so frustrated that one time, he was living in the next room, in these rooms that were built on the land, and I could hear him moving about his room. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, what's going on? So I opened my door, and there he was, locking his door, fully dressed. And I said, "Maharaj, where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to go see Srila Prabhupada and talk to him why he hasn't said anything about Radharani." I said, "Okay." So he walked all the way to Radha Damodar and stood outside Srila Prabhupada's room. Srila Prabhupada heard someone outside his door. Srila Prabhupada said, "Who's there?" "It's me, Srila Prabhupada, it's Subal Swami." "Oh, come in, come in." So we went inside, and Subal Maharaj was telling Prabhupada, he said, "Prabhupada, I can't concentrate on my japa." He says, "All I'm thinking of is paying these checks to these contractors and paying, wage checks to workers that are working here." He says, "My mind's all flustered." He says, "I can't think of my japa, my chanting. What can I do?" "I thought you were going to mention about some intimacy with Radharani's pastimes. It's mentioned at the end of the Nectar of Devotion." So Prabhupada was silent, and because this Subal told us when he got back to his room. So Prabhupada was silent, and all of a sudden Prabhupada said, "When Krishna drew Arjuna's chariot in between the two armies, so Arjuna could observe who was who in each camp, Prabhupada said, Arjuna, he didn't put his bow down and sit in lotus position meditating on Krishna. His service was to see how many soldiers, day in, day out, night in, night out, day in, day out, he could kill. Over 640 million soldiers was killed in that battle of Kurukshetra over 18 days. It was the biggest battlefield. It was the biggest battle within the last 6,000 years. 640 million soldiers died, and there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers that just disappeared because they were using mystic weapons. So Srila Prabhupada said to Maharaj, he said, am I asking you to kill anybody? No, Srila Prabhupada. What am I asking you to do? Well, I have to sign off on these checks. And he says, and what else? And I have to chant my japa, Srila Prabhupada. So he says, well, what's the problem? What's the difficulty? Why are you confused? Why are you unhappy? And he couldn't say anything to Srila Prabhupada. So then he just left the room, even without saying anything to Prabhupada. He walked all the way back to Raman Reddy to his room, and he packed up his things and he left. And he was never seen again. So Srila Prabhupada, he was simply trying to get him to understand where you're actually at in Krishna consciousness. And that's why Prabhupada spoke about you're not this body. Because there is so much depth in that analytical study of Sankhya philosophy that sometimes we've taken for granted because we want to know more, but we're not really ready to know. So that was a very interesting story of how Srila Prabhupada was very adamant about what he should say and what he shouldn't say within those Nectar of Devotion classes.
I questioned Prabhupada on the morning walk. I said, Prabhupada, I have translated the Bhagavad Gita together with Sacinandan Prabhu at that time, and Vedavyas Prabhu. And a verse came up in Sanskrit from Bhagavatam. One who chants the holy name is taking bath in all the holy rivers of India and visit all the holy places of India. So Srila Prabhupada doesn't mean that I was born in India in my last life. And Prabhupada chuckled, he said, well, maybe. He said, but actually, what you have to understand is that I created you good fortune. And so I thought about it a long time. And I came to this conclusion that really the Hare Krishna mantra was a secret for so many years. It was spoken by Krishna to Ganga Devi This holy name will go all over the world. But it was a secret thing from spiritual master to disciple for centuries. But then Lord Chaitanya came, and he is a game changer. He opened the stores of love of God, meaning he distributed the Hare Krishna mantra without any discrimination to anybody and everybody. And in this way, that verse is kind of retired from Srimad Bhagavatam, is replaced by a new phase in the development of the Earth planet by Lord Chaitanya's arrival and his opening. And Prabhupada is his number one in missionaries. He was predicted by Lord Chandas Thakur, my Bhakta will come and he will preach Krishna consciousness all over the world. That's Srila Prabhupada. And that's Prabhupada created my good fortune and your good fortune and good fortune for all the generations to come. I remember one time we went in Vondelpark. Vondelpark is in Amsterdam, in the middle of Amsterdam. There were 20,000 hippies camping out there. And so we walked this small gravel path, and there was a little bench, and there was a bush. Behind the bush, there was a boy and a girl. They were doing it. They were naked like rabbits. And Prabhupada walked by. And I had not only one look, I had a second look. So Prabhupada couldn't see me, I was behind him. He turned around to me like this, in a very serious way. So I understood, don't do that.
In Mayapur, they bought a motorbike. They felt that they needed it for whatever reason. I don't know what. Prabhupada, when he came to Mayapur next time, he didn't like the fact that they bought this motorbike. He felt that it was a waste of money and they should return it. But in Vrindavan, I bought a motorbike. And I was fully aware that Prabhupada didn't like the motorbike in Mayapur. But all we had to get back and forth to Mathura, and we had to go there many times to get cement quotas and different things, was a rickshaw. A rickshaw going back and forth in those days, it was like a 2-hour journey. And sometimes in the hot sun with the loo winds, it wasn't nice. So I bought this motorbike, and it was such a relief. You could do things so much quicker. Anyway, Srila Prabhupada was due to come, and I was anticipating Prabhupada calling me in his room and telling me what a nonsense I was for buying the bike. So he came, and I had to drive out onto the Delhi Agra road to look for Prabhupada's car coming, and then I would whiz back to the temple so a nice big kirtan would be ready and playing when Srila Prabhupada arrived. And I had Hansa Duda. He had taken sannyas about 2 months earlier, and he was on the back of the bike and he's holding his danda, and off we went, waiting for Prabhupada's car. Unfortunately, on the bike in those days, the motorbike, it was a kickstart and not an easy electrical button start on the handlebars. So what happened, while we were waiting for Srila Prabhupada's car to come, I stalled the bike, and the bike wouldn't start. So I wasn't very big, so I was trying to start the bike, and it wouldn't start, and it wouldn't start. And then slowly we saw Prabhupada's car coming towards us. It was about 300 or 400, yards away, or meters away. And he got closer and closer, and I was kicking. And finally I managed to get it going, and Prabhupada's car whizzed by. So I got on the motorbike, Hansa Duda got on the back, and full throttle, I opened it right up, and we caught up to the car. And I kind of slightly looked as I was passing the car, and Srila Prabhupada was looking out like this. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was sitting next to him, and he said, "Who's that?" And he says, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, it's Gunarnava." And I think Hansadula is on the back. So got the kirtan started. A couple of minutes later, Prabhupada's car arrived. Nice kirtan, everything hunky-dory. And I was just in anticipation. I was in anxiety. I was thinking Prabhupada's going to be very upset with me and displeased. So nothing happened the first day. Second day, nothing happened. Didn't get any call to go in and see Prabhupada. Third day, after Mangalati, Prabhupada wanted to see me, and it was slightly raining outside. It started to rain. So I went in to see Srila Prabhupada, and I was waiting, and come. So I stayed by the door initially, but then Prabhupada wanted me to come right up to his table. And I, with folded hands, said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, I want you to go pick up my godbrother from the Radha Gopinath temple. His name's Govardhan Maharaj. And he's very portly. And he's got a long beard. So I want you to pick him up because we're going to do bhajans together. He's an expert madanga player. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, that's fine. I'll arrange for him to come. And Prabhupada said to me, so you will go on your bike? And by Prabhupada saying that, all my anxiety just was gone, finished. And I replied to Prabhupada, I said, actually Prabhupada, it's a bit dangerous to ride on these wet roads on the motorbike, especially with your godbrother being a bit large. And Prabhupada sort of laughed a little bit. He says, yes. I said, so I'll arrange a rickshaw, Srila Prabhupada. And he says, yes, that's fine. So that was such a relief. And you can see, you can never know the circumstances behind Prabhupada's decisions.
One time on this road here, right here in Vrindavan, it was a sandy road at that time. So I walked behind Prabhupada, and I stepped on his heel. He took his cane and pressed it on my breast and said, so, are you now satisfied? And I said, my Srila Prabhupada, I'm so sorry. You know, it was to some other incident because he made a complaint about the situation in Germany. And the solution was that that person who was in charge couldn't come back to Germany. That's why are you not satisfied? But I took it that are you not satisfied that I step on your heel? He said, no, it doesn't matter. I said, that doesn't matter. When you're going back to Germany? I said, tomorrow morning. He said, no. He said, you must change your ticket. He said, immediately go and change your ticket. You have to stay at least another 3 weeks. And there was a beautiful tree there. He looked up to the tree and said, just enjoy the spiritual atmosphere. And that's what we did. We sat in class every day at him under the tree and enjoyed the spiritual atmosphere to the max. Then when we left, in the middle of the night, we came by his house. And Hare Krishna said, where are you going? He said, we're going back to Germany. Does Prabhupada know about it? Did you get his blessing? He said, no. He should go. He said, it's in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock, he must be sleeping. He said, Prabhupada doesn't sleep. He can go upstairs. So Prabhupada was lying in his bed, he was resting. He said, so, somebody's coming. Who's that? I said, this is Prithu Das, Vyas. What's happening? He said, we are leaving to Germany. I said, oh, you're going back to Germany. Please accept my blessings. And that was the end of that. But I realized that Prabhupada is such a kind man, so concerned. Even if somebody steps on his heel, it doesn't matter to him, because he saw it all in Krishna consciousness, you know. And he immediately turned it into something very nice. He invited us to stay in Vrindavan. It was a big thing, you know. I didn't expect that, and so we were in Vrindavan.
You know, these smiles that Prabhupada sometimes would have, he smiled so broadly that his mouth almost reached the sides of his cheeks. And you could see all his teeth. And Prabhupada looked beautiful. He had such a beautiful ambience about him. Anyway, we all followed Prabhupada into his room. He was very happy to see his house. Sarabi made an incredible house for Prabhupada. If you go to every room and see how it's all put together, it's an amazing house. Anyway, we had kirtan. Kirtan was, there must have been about 15 devotees or something like that. But we had a beautiful kirtan. Prabhupada spoke for 3 or 4 minutes. And then Prabhupada said, so you all go and to your services and like that. So we were walking out of the room. And Prabhupada said, oh, and before you go, someone clean up this mess on the white sheets. Because, we'd been dancing and lots of dust from the feet and bits and pieces. You know how things go. So all of a sudden there's one devotee, he's an English devotee, his name's Charanarvindam. Very tall, very blonde, big seeker, He built Prabhupada's lotus pool in Prabhupada's back garden. Yeah. And he said, Srila Prabhupada, that's not mess. That's the dust from the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. And I was thinking, oh my God, what's Prabhupada going to say now? Prabhupada, my memories of Prabhupada, working with Prabhupada in Vrindavan, it was the thunderbolt constantly, 95% thunderbolt, because of the pressures that Prabhupada was under that we weren't completely aware of. So to be so flippant like that to Prabhupada, I thought he was going to get angry. Prabhupada, that's not a mess. That's the dust from the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. Then Prabhupada says, just see how advanced he is. I'm thinking it's mess, and he's thinking it's from the lotus feet of the Vaishnavas. Wow. So he said, so now you just carry on and you go out. So we started to go out again. I thought, oh, he hasn't said anything. Started to go out, and then Prabhupada said, oh, and by the way, clean up this mess. So, Prabhupada had such an easygoing side to him, and his jovial nature would come up from time to time.
When Prabhupada came, he wanted to speak to some personalities of stature. So I arranged with him to meet Professor Durkheim, world famous man because he brought Zen Buddhism to the Western world. He was the ambassador of Germany to Japan, and he went into a Zen monastery and studied Zen. So he came back. And when I saw in the papers that so many bishops came to him for a seminar to cool their brains in his Zen meditations, I thought that's the man Prabhupada would meet. And so I called him on the phone, presented with my Guru Maharaj, spiritual master, I'm sending you his books. He said, look at these books. They'll call you in about 3 weeks and tell me what you think. So he read the books and said, wonderful, I want to meet him. I want to meet Prabhupada, So when Prabhupada came, the professor was very happy to see him. Prabhupada was very happy to see him. And he always asked this question, what is your philosophy? Prabhupada's standard question. And so the man explained Zen Buddhism. And so then Prabhupada said, now my question is, when a person dies, you believe in reincarnation, don't you? I said, yes. He said, when the person dies, what goes into the other body? And the man said, the mind. That's Buddhist philosophy, the mind. Yam Yam Bismillah Bhavan. Prabhupada said, that's right, the mind. What else? There's nothing. Prabhupada said, mind is just one component of the subtle body. There's Mana Sarira, Buddha Sarira, the intelligence, Ahankara. 3 items go, like a wheel, like a three-wheeler. And then what else goes? Who's the passenger of this car? The person smiled and said, Swami, you lost me. I don't have an answer for that. He said, you're the passenger. And who's the driver? So I don't know, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The professor was really in awe. So when he listened to Prabhupada, spontaneously, this guy was 72 years old, Prabhupada was 72. He was 2 years younger than Prabhupada. From a very noble family, aristocratic family, they have a castle, everything, 800 years old family. You're all young boys sitting there, and girls. He got up and paid Dandava to Prabhupada. He took his foot, put his head, and said, Swami, please accept me as your younger brother. It was a big thing. So on his way to the railway station, I drove him, because I took care of him from the beginning to the end. He said, I have met many swamis, many sannyasis, many gurus, many sadhus, many mahants in India. I met the Pope 2 times. I met everybody who is anybody in the Jewish community. I never in my life met somebody like you, Prabhupada. He said, this is the greatest event in my life. He said, he is through. He's on the other side. It was very amazing. How he appreciated Prabhupada so much after talking, understanding the deepness of Prabhupada and his stately upbringing and stately presentation and everything.
Outside of Prabhupada's house was at least 40 brahmacharis, right? And they all had the peg shoes and the fancy dhoti style, you know. And it was an issue. This was a huge issue. A brahmachari getting married the first time in Vrindavan, an ISKCON man getting married in Vrindavan. In those days, believe it or not, it was only sannyas and brahmachari that mattered. Grihastha, you know. So we went in, and Prabhupada said to me, what news? And I said, I've just come in, Srila Prabhupada, to ask you what is your opinion about me getting married. And he said, what's wrong with marriage? I was shocked, you know, what's wrong with marriage? I said, I thought perhaps I could travel and preach and kind of transcend the desire to want to get married, you know. Prabhupada said, you can never transcend the desire because your mind is always with you. So, and then I said to him, before Prabhupada had a chance to say anything more to me, I said to Prabhupada, ultimately, it's about pleasing you, Srila Prabhupada. I want to please you. So I want my direction to be positive for me so I can carry on pleasing you, not be concerned about which ashram I need to go in next. And that's why I've come to you. Please instruct me, Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, that is the attitude to take. Pleasing your guru is the main business of the disciple. So he says, so right. So I want you to get married, get rooms, live with your wife, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. And that was it. It took about 10 minutes, the whole thing. And I came out and there was even more brahmacharis outside. All probably wanting to get married. But they would, you know, sometimes we we can be artificial in the way we act. Sometimes we can just, like people say, live the dream. Living the dream is you're not being yourself. You're not considering what's really best for you spiritually. And so the numbers increased outside, and I went out. Even Gopal Krishna Maharaj was outside trying to keep some sort of sanity, because there was so many brahmacharis. I don't know where they came from, you know. There was such a huge amount there. And I said, so Prabhupada sanctioned me to get married. Really? Wow, that's good. And I would say over the next year or so, a large majority of that big group of brahmacharis were married, you know. So that's that one.
Then he met this Christian professor, professor for Christian theology and philosophy, Professor Porsche. And Prabhupada asked him the same question, like always, standard questions. What is your philosophy? Yes, Jesus died for our sins, and nobody comes to the Father through me, and all these things we have heard in church since childhood, right? And then Prabhupada didn't say anything. After some time, Prabhupada yawned. He was tired, you know. So the professor said, Swamiji, what do you think of this? Prabhupada didn't say a thing. There's deep silence in the room. We were all waiting. And into this silence, Prabhupada said, like a rumbling cloud, said, 2,000 years have passed, Professor Porsche, and still you don't understand Jesus. Professor went, why do you say that? And Prabhupada said, because if you can understand Jesus, you can understand Krishna, which is exactly actually a sentence from the Gospel of John. If you understand me, you understand the Father. And if you understand Krishna, you can understand Jesus. And if you say you love Jesus, you must also love Krishna, because Jesus has loved your Lord. And if you love Krishna, you love Jesus. And if you tell me you want to love only Jesus and not Krishna, that means you have no knowledge. It was like a cutting edge answer that really brought the conversation to its highlight. You know, I was almost jumping up. I was so happy to hear such a clear presentation by Srila Prabhupada. There's another personality, Professor Heidegger, Martin Heidegger. He is world famous. He's an icon in the last century of philosophy. If you study philosophy anywhere in the world, you have to study Martin Heidegger. Or Sri Ramasundar, he went particularly to Germany to study Heidegger. So he called me. Prabhupada wants to talk to Heidegger. So I went there. I found out, you know, as a college boy, I find my way in the university, asked the professor, where is he living? And who are you? I said, I'm working with Professor such and such in comparative religion. So he said, all right, he's living over there. So I went to him, and a lady came out and said, you look very different, she said. I said, don't worry, I come from an Eastern religiosity. I accepted this as my lifestyle. My spiritual master wants to meet your husband. And she said, it was too late. I said, why is it too late? He said, well, is he gone? I said, no, he's upstairs. I said, then why can I talk to him? He said, he doesn't understand anything anymore. So I understood he was gone in his mind. I said, he won't complain either. I said, and she laughed at me when I said that. You can go. So I sat there, and at the head of this icon, this huge tower of knowledge, he wrote, Being and Time. It's a classic. He lay there, and his wife settled at his feet. And I said to him, Professor Heidegger, I said, can you hear me? He said, no. No answer. I said, Professor Heidegger, louder, can you hear me? No answer. I took the Bhagavad Gita, touched his hand. As soon as I did so, he grabbed the Bhagavad Gita. He lifted up the Bhagavad Gita, opened his eyes and said, Bhagavad Gita, I know this book. He started crying. Bhagavad Gita, I know this book. Pressed it to his heart and fell back into wherever he was. His wife said, how did you do that? I've not seen him like this since 8 years. How did he do that? I don't know. I had no answer. Of Prabhupada's mercy, you know. And in his last interview in Germany, he said only God can help us as far as the state of the civilization when this question was asked. Where's the world going? He said only God can help us. And we get credit for that. That's why Prabhupada woke him up from the dead, literally. He died sometimes later. Such a wonderful story.
Prabhupada was getting really unwell, and he recently came back from a life member's house in Rishikesh. They thought that if Prabhupada went up to Rishikesh, living near the Ganga, he could regain some sort of resemblance to health. And he was there with Tamal Krishna and Bhakti Charu. There was, I think, I don't know if Shrudakirti, is he here? Has he come? Abhiram, yeah. There was about 4 or 5 devotees with Srila Prabhupada. Eventually, Prabhupada called Bhakti Charu into his room and said, I need to go back to Vrindavan immediately. He says, I have symptoms. Prabhupada's teeth were falling out, and which one of the symptoms of knowing that you're near death when all your teeth start to fall out. And that was what was happening with Prabhupada. Prabhupada knew that he was going to go at some point. So they rushed him back to Vrindavan. And Prabhupada called me into his room and he said, I can't eat anything. But what I could do is drink milk, but I need special milk. I need you to find me a jet black cow that has no other markings. It has to be completely 100% black. And it took about, I'd say it took about 8 days to find that particular cow. And we brought it back and we tied the cow to Srila Prabhupada's house, the front of his house, so the milk was on tap whenever they wanted it. So at that time, we were also arranging for 24-hour kirtan. That's how the 24-hour kirtan started, when there were small groups of devotees going in to chant to Prabhupada. But it was very quiet chanting with very small symbols. They weren't even cartels. They were like very small symbols. So I was leading one group. One of the other devotees, his name was Pushkar. He was an artist that lived in America. And we were quietly chanting. And the longer I sat near Prabhupada, I started to well up. All these emotional feelings started to really rise within me. And I just couldn't control myself as I was playing the cymbals. I shouted out to Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada! I was really loud, not as loud as this, but it was really loud. And I thought, you've blown it again. You know, Prabhupada was in deep contemplation, thinking of Krishna, and now you shouted, disturbed him. And then Prabhupada says, stop chanting. And I stopped chanting, and he said, you repeated the same things again to me. You have brought me this cow. This is your mercy, this is your mercy. He kept on saying this, and I just felt, Lord Caitanya says you have to appear as a fool in front of the spiritual master. And I can't say anything else. It was just pure mercy. And all I can do is keep serving Srila Prabhupada. That's all. That's all we can do.
In Sweden, There's a very awesome story that Prabhupada, he came to a university in Stockholm. It was a very left university, radical, full of radicals. Marxists, Leninists, Stalinists, Mao Zedong-ists, Ho Chi Minh-ists, anarchists. Everybody on the left side was there. Now these people don't agree with each other. They have their differences according to their sectarian views on communism. But on one thing they agree, as a classless society. That's the number one denominating factor that they all agree. So Prabhupada had no idea that what he was walking into. He sat down, he sang Jaya Madhava, looked over spectacles, and studied the people, and then he said, so, Krishna says, Chatu Vanamaya Sistam, there are 4 classes of men. First class men, second class men, third class men, fourth class men. And first class men is the Brahmins, the philosophers, religious people, Kshatriya, the administrative class, working class, and business class, farmers, and ultimately the working class, which is the highest in communism. And then somebody of the students took up, very angry, and said, of course, Swamiji, you sit on a high throne, decorated with flowers, and everybody goes down in front of you, saying to us that you're first class. And Prabhupada said, no. Prabhupada said, no, you misunderstand me. Like this, you totally misunderstand me. He said, I'm 5th class. There was dead silence in the room. And I sat there, 3 foot in front of Prabhupada, maybe 4. He said, because I'm the servant of everyone. And then behind his spectacles, 2 big tears rolled down his cheeks. It was such a meaningful moment to show that Prabhupada, he was a top man, but at the same time he was the most humble. The man stood there and you looked back at him as if he were a demon. He sat quietly down. It was Prabhupada's victory, his humility. So when Srila Prabhupada came to Frankfurt, to our castle, Rettershof at that time, the central temple in Germany at that time. So I was managing the event. There were about 220 devotees there. And I had a big board on the wall with all the names there. This in this department, that department. I could see where everybody was working in this temple, how to organize everybody. So Prabhupada, I felt somebody was behind me. I looked to his shoulder. This Prabhupada standing there. He had been watching me. And he said, what is this? I said, this is my board. All the devotees are on this board. I can see what everybody is doing in the daily department, in the kitchen department, in the Harinam, in the book distribution, etc., cleaning up. He said, and then what we do? I said, Srila Prabhupada, I can take one person from here, this department to that department, and one person from this department to that department. He said, how does that work? I said, Srila Prabhupada, it's magnetic strips. He said, can I try that? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. So he said, all right, let's take this boy from here to there, from the kitchen to the daily, from this to there. He moved some people around. He enjoyed it because he had never seen such a thing. Then he turned to me and said, and all this will fail 100%. There was deep silence there. He said, 100% unless there's love and trust between the devotees, this will fail. So I understood from this little incident that Prabhupada was telling me that love and trust is what makes our society go. It's an underlying ingredient, like the grease in an engine. It makes the engine go. If there's no love and trust, our society will not go anywhere. That was my understanding of this situation. So we had this temple in Frankfurt, the beautiful castle. It was kind of the headquarters of the financial aristocracy of Germany. They used to hang out there. And so one story is, when Prabhupada arrived, there was a riding school there. All these people were riding. They stood in Spalier. They stood, a whole row of them, greeting Prabhupada. It was amazing. Next day, we had a reception in a hotel. Prabhupada was supposed to speak. And all these super wealthy people were there. With heads like on a racehorse course in England, and Jaguars and Mercedes and Rolls Royce and Bentley. I mean, these were the top of the people. So we went into this hall, first class hotel, and Prabhupada saw there was a huge Vyasasan on the stage. He said, I was walking right there, he said, take that seat out. And our leader said, but Prabhupada, we made it for you. There's a huge Vyasasan. He said, take that seat out. So we went up there, people were watching, the seat went out, a normal chair arrived, and this one, Prabhupada sat down. And all the people, they started clapping because they appreciated that he wouldn't sit on a throne in front of them. You know, it was so beautiful display of Prabhupada's kindness and humility. So one time our GBC was right here at the time decided this place is too difficult to manage. Let's get rid of it. So Prabhupada loved that place. And he heard about it. So he invited us to come to Paris. And so we sat in front of Prabhupada, Caitanya, myself, and Gauravani Maharaj. At that time, BWS Prabhu. And Prabhupada said, I heard you want to give up this castle. I said, yes, Prabhupada. Why do you want to give up this castle? And he explained our BBC, out of this reason and that reason, that. And Prabhupada said, no, this is a nice place. He said, you never get a place like this again. It's a very regal place outside of Frankfurt. All the big people are living here. Don't sell it. Don't get rid of it. He said, no, we have to. The argument went back and forth. Then Prabhupada said, and even if your child has been born deaf and blind, doesn't mean you kill it. He screamed at the top of his head. He was blue in his face. He was so angry. It's like a lion. Doesn't mean you kill it. He screamed again, does it mean you kill it? You know, like this, you know, in our seats. And he said very peacefully, don't kill it. He said, develop it. Don't become rolling stones. Set moss on. And so I could see that Prabhupada, he could switch on his anger from one moment to another when necessary to make a point. But he was never angry in that sense. He was a self-realized soul, complete in control of his emotions. So it must have been in 1973 or 4 when we came to India. And we had this program going out all over the different holy places. And so when Prikram ended up in one of Prabhupada Godbrother's place. And so there was some discussion going on. Now I was young before, I didn't understand much of the controversy that was actually playing itself out. So when we came back, we heard that Prabhupada was very angry. He wanted to see all the leaders. So all the GBC had to go into his room. I was the temple president in Heidelberg. I had to go in his room. Somehow they ended up right in front of his table. And he said, where have you been today? He said, well, we went to such and such ashram. He said, have you been invited to come? I said, yes. He said, Prabhupada said, what does that mean? Disciples have been invited. Spiritual master was not invited. What does that mean? I mean, he was angry. I sit right in front of him. He became very cool. He said, next, what happened next? Well, actually, Prabhupada, Achyutananda Maharaj said, they were praising you. Prabhupada said, it was a praise. Well, they said that our Swami Bonnie went to England and he preached to the aristocracy and he couldn't make any impact. But Swamiji, he went to New York and he preached to drunkards and drug addicts and hippies and homeless people. And he became very successful. Prabhupada said, who was in the audience? They said, well, very big people from Calcutta. He said, what do you think? But they think that I could save only fools and rascals? What about Sariputta? He's a PhD. What about Swami Dhamma? He's a PhD. Don't you see how they're insulting me? Don't you see? Silence. Then Prabhupada said, what happened then? Then we took prasada. Did we have to pay for it? So yes, Prabhupada. Prabhupada, you fools! Not only you have to hear the insults to your spiritual master, you paid for it. Your spiritual life is scarred. Leave my room. It was a shocking event.
was a very busy morning. I was living in one of the rooms that we'd built. And I thought, I'm just going to try to take 10, 15 minutes rest, you know. And I was just preparing to lie down, and all of a sudden, bang, bang on the door, like the door was being hit so fiercely that I thought it was just going to come down. I thought, who the hell's that, you know? So I opened the door. Well, I had to drag it open because it was all distorted now. And there was Brahmananda. And, you know, he's a big guy, you know. And when he's not happy, he's got this frown, you know, to go along with his masculinity. It's like, Prabhupada wants to see you immediately. And I thought, oh, what a greeting. You know. I wonder why he didn't say that nicely. Hey, Gunarnava, how are you going? You know, it's, why didn't you come in? Prabhupada would love to see you. Or, you know, something like that. Prabhupada wants to see you. Anyway, so I go in, and I thought, well, I wonder what's going to happen. So I'm in the room, and I was kind of positioned up against one of the walls of the big room where he did all his preaching to the guests that came. And Pradyumna Panditji was sitting on the floor. Brahmananda was standing some ways away. And Srila Prabhupada was standing over Pradyumna. And he was shouting. And he was shaking. And his eyes were like saucers. And the room, you could have just cut the atmosphere. It was so surcharged. And Prabhupada was shaking. He just didn't stop shaking. And he would bang his fist on the tables. I've never, ever seen Srila Prabhupada in this kind of mood. And it kind of frightened me to some extent. So I kind of used the wall as a bit of a prop to lean against, you know. And then I thought to myself, what am I doing here? What's this got to do with me? So the whole issue that unfolded was, when Panditji came to Vrindavan, he was a bookworm. He loved to get books, you know, go around the Goswami temples, meeting different Prabhupada, you know, godbrothers and so on. And he met this one Grihasta, godbrother of Srila Prabhupada. His name was Purushottam Das Adhikari. And he seemed a very nice person. He would come, he would listen to Prabhupada preach in the evenings. I met him 3 or 4 times. He seemed very gentlemanly, very Vaishnav-like. And then apparently, because there was a story that I wasn't really privy to at the time, where his godbrother had asked Prabhupada if he could borrow some Bhagavatams. And he took them back to the Radha Gopinath temple where he was staying. And he started reading the purports. And he had a notebook and a pen. And as he was reading the word-for-word synonyms, the translation, the purports, he was making notes like this. And I think he went through about a chapter and a half. So his notebook was starting to really fill up. And Srila Prabhupada found out, because his godbrother went to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, I've been reading your books, and I was going to suggest some changes, you know. And I just thought, I wonder what you like. Prabhupada at the time, when he was being confronted like this, didn't really show any rage or, you know, but he wanted his books back. So after he had left, the following day, which was the day now that I'm describing, yeah, they were original Bhagavatams, and also the 72 Macmillan. It was the first three. They weren't what he brought. They were the ones that came from Rameshwar.
Okay.
Yeah.
BBT one.
Slightly later, yeah. So there was also the Macmillan 72 Gita also that he'd borrowed. So Srila Prabhupada was so upset that his books were being changed by his godbrother, or there was the idea of change. And then Prabhupada said, first of all, he had so many other books when he was translating. Sometimes Prabhupada would only translate a sentence all night, all morning, as long as he was doing it. Other times it would be a complete flow. And then Srila Prabhupada said, do you know what I am when I'm sitting early in the morning when you're all sleeping? He says, I'm a dictaphone. And he had around him Baladev Vidyabhusana's books, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's books, Bhaktivinoda. He had so many reference material. But he said, and these are descriptions from myself. This is my subjective reality. He said, Krishna would also come and sit with me and tell me what to write. You know, these are not exaggerations, and they're not political statements either. This is reality. These are true descriptions. So Prabhupada didn't stop at that. He started raging again. How dare they think they can change books? Prabhupada would say, Prabhupada would be reading his books, and his disciples on different occasions would say, Prabhupada, why are you reading your own books? He says, because I didn't write these books. It was Krishna. He helped me. So I became Krishna's dictaphone. And then I would write in my, speak in my dictaphone. And then they would get recorded. How dare anybody think that they can change my books? I haven't finished yet. No, it's all right. I've got to say. So it was the very first time I've ever heard this. Pradyumna, he was like a ghost, and his head was down. And Prabhupada just kept on and on. Now what happens, you know when you try to reach high notes in your voice? Like opera singers, they can go very high. They got very high octave strength. Srila Prabhupada was going so high in his voice when he was condemning and shouting, and that he started to screech. His voice went into screech mode because there was nothing left octavely wise. And what are you to say? And Srila Prabhupada said these words for the first time. I've never heard them before, but I realize what they mean now. Asa Prayoga. Prabhupada said, you can never change the Acharya's books. Never. So, unfortunately, lots of changes have been made. And sometimes I wake up in shock because I have dreams about that experience. And I mentioned it to the GBC, going back about 15 years ago. And they had a vote on it, apparently. Should we keep Prabhupada's books as they were, or should should we allow changes? And I was told by one vote of the GBC, it was decided to change the books. So when I'm not in Vrindavan, myself and my wife Vishalini, we go out every day distributing Prabhupada's books, his original books.
I was doing quite a bit of book distribution, running temples, opening temples. I was busy. And so when Prabhupada left, I got the news that I was packing my Sankirtan van, and you have to go to India, Prabhupada is leaving. And I was kind of in shock, because why me? There's so many devotees. But I understood there was some call behind it. So when I arrived in his room, Prabhupada was very emaciated, you know. I'd seen him in London before, a couple of months before in spring. He was even more emaciated. And so as soon as I came into the room, he said, Tamal, somebody can sing. And Tamal said, anybody can sing? He said, yes, I can sing. Can you play harmonium? He said, yes. So sing. So I sang for Prabhupada 2 hours. When I'm finished, Prabhupada said, let him come back. So Tamal came after me and said, tomorrow morning, 2 o'clock, you have to sing up to 8, 6 hours. And I sang for 6 hours. When I was finished, Prabhupada said, let him come back. So every time, every day, every single day up to his leaving, I sang in the morning, he left in the evening. That was a big thing for me. It was amazing that he wanted me to sing. He liked my simple melodies, you know, very simple. Different melodies, but very simple. Prabhupada liked simple, you know, and he appreciated it. So there was one incident 2 days before he left, 3 days, that he was given medicine by his servant. And Prabhupada said, did you close the bottle? And he said, I forgot Prabhupada. Prabhupada was a medical man. He would open the bottle, take the medicine out, close the bottle, because he may knock over the bottle. So he said, did you close the bottle? He said, I forgot. He said, Prabhupada, that is your disease, he said, all of you. You know how to open bottles, you don't know how to close them. You start so many new things, and you don't see the consequences. It was such a deep answer, you know, to the problems of the world. I mean, look at the whole environment. The oceans are destroyed, the air is destroyed, the food is destroyed, the earth is destroyed, the body. It's all opening bottles, opening bottles, opening bottles, you know. And we have this problem ever since Prabhupada left, opening bottles. And then he said, you know how to live, but you don't know how to die. I have to show you. Then 1 day later, Prabhupada was about to leave. He lifted up his hand very peacefully, like this, you know. And then he said, everything moving, it took him some time to express that, everything moving and non-moving, there's nothing but Krishna. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. And then half an hour later, Hare Krishna, he was gone. And there was a huge kirtan there. I heard this also yesterday on your tapes. I had the impression that there was no roof. There were thousands of people singing. I have other people confirmed the same thing. Thousands of people singing, glorifying Prabhupada. In fact, I came to the conclusion our kirtan was part of a higher kirtan that was already going on. We became tuned into the show that was going on when Prabhupada left. That was his departure.
Je anilo premadana koruna prachu